Hey, hi to those that joined. Just make yourself comfortable. We're going to give others a few moments before we get into this hot and spicy webinar. So just hang tight, get ready, get comfortable, and just want to make sure the max amount of people get to join. So in the meantime, we did get some requests for some music. I think it was the Spice Up Your Life was the one that you were asking for, Carrie.
Yep, Spice Girl, spice up your life. Perfect.
The Spice Up Your Life song. I haven't heard this song in so long. Ages, ages. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to get settled a little bit, make sure everybody gets to enjoy the whole webinar. So just hang tight. And we're going to be talking about Sriracha shortages, CEA. Okay, wait. There's one more, which is the hot in here, right? Oh. Okay, the music's probably too short or too quiet. Thanks for that. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on how CEA can help replenish Sriracha, which is a very specific topic. And I'm so excited about this webinar because we have an incredible group of panelists, and we're going to be talking about a very specific issue that actually represents a much broader issue in our food system. So again, we're so happy you're here and you joined. We hope you're comfortable. We hope you enjoy yourself. And we're going to have some other people joining in as well. So as we get started with the webinar, I just wanted to share a few sort of tips for maximizing your experience in the webinar here. So first is some etiquette for Zoom and how webinars work. We would love to get to know you. We really want to know who you are and where you're from. So please use the group chat and put in there who you are. What's your name? Where are you located? Maybe the company you work for. That'd all be really great. It tells us where you're from and what you're interested in. I also think your time is really valuable, so it's good to set an intention. What do you really hope to learn about today? What are you most interested in? What are your goals for today's webinar? So you can take notes and be really focused on that and make sure you have any follow-up that you want to have with any of our incredible panelists today. And finally, there is a Q&A feature. You should see it at the bottom of your Zoom Q&A. You put in the question, all of us get to see what your question is as panelists, and we can answer them either by typing in answers or choosing some to answer live. Now, this is going to be a tight sort of middle of the day webinar, so we're probably only going to get to 1 to 2 questions, so make sure you give us your best questions ever, although we typically try to answer the questions after the fact where possible, considering that you've joined us. So please don't hesitate to use the Q&A feature and answer them there. The chat is more for conversation. The Q&A feature is more for the questions and answers. So today I want to just share that our webinar is being made possible by Re-Nuble. Have you heard of Re-Nuble? They're quite exciting, incredible company that's taking food waste and turning it into various products for agriculture. One of their products, which is the newest and most exciting, is the Re-Nuterra mat. Now, this is basically a grow media that you can use for production in your farm, but the benefit is it comes from a more sustainable source. It also can be customizable to your needs and your sizes and shapes, and it's actually cost competitive. So there's really a great justification for you to engage with Re-Nuble, to ask them about your substrate needs, to talk to them about your substrate needs and ask them what's possible with their solution. So check them out at re-nuble.com, or you can contact us for a case study. There's also this little QR code so you can look at the results from some of the farms that they've been working with. So without further ado, let's get into the webinar and start talking about this spicy topic with our panelists. First, I want to invite Tania Pina to introduce herself. How are you doing, Tania?
Really well, Henry. Thank you.
So good to see you. How are you? How's things on your end? How's Re-Nuble? You've been running this business for a while. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. And the reason why we started this theme is because we wanted to also introduce and offer ways that, CEA growers, but just agriculture at large can think about growing commodities outside or beyond the leafy green category. So my name is Tania Pina. I'm the founder and CEO of Re-Nuble. At Re-Nuble, we consider ourselves circular innovators. And what does that mean exactly? We basically use an organic cycling science approach to convert things like an unrecoverable vegetative produce byproducts or crop residue into either liquid nutrient blends or peat-free horticultural substrates, as Henry showed. So really happy to contribute here and looking forward to some of the industry statistics and trends that we'll be talking about.
Amazing. Thanks, Tania. Always a pleasure to work with you and to hear from you. And thanks for coming up with this really cool topic that I think is a unique webinar that I've never covered before. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's go over to you, JC. Can you tell us a bit about who you are, where you are?
Yeah, how's it going, everybody? Thank you, Henry, for introducing me, and Tania for having us all. My name is JC. I've been operating cultivation bioengineering as a global consulting firm. I'm currently located in Arkansas, but I'm usually moving around the world and deal mostly with the technical side of all this.
Amazing. So you're a consultant, you've got experience growing and researching, so you can give us a lot of perspective on these systems. Great. Looks like our chat is getting started. I love to hear this. Thanks, Chris. Let's get some more. Hi, Jeff. Good to see you again. So make sure to use the chat to talk about where you're from and what you do. Last but not least, we're joined by Carrie Meltzer from Hydro Peppers. Carrie, how are you doing?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me today.
Carrie, tell us about yourself. Where are you? What do you do?
So I'm located in Rockville Center, New York. It's just outside of New York City. And I have a real small urban farm that I'm working on here. I live in an apartment with no outdoor space. The prices of food is astronomical these days. So I'm just trying to be as self-sustaining as possible. I got really into the peppers. So it's turned into mainly growing peppers here is what I do.
That's so cool. And you're growing them at home and you've done other things before. We'll get into that a little bit more about the why you started to grow your own peppers because it relates to this topic. And so I'm Henry Gordon Smith, founder and CEO of Agritecture. Sometimes you see me on social media touring farms. Sometimes I'm traveling, speaking at events, and I get excited about hosting webinars like this or moderating webinars like this to share more knowledge, which is something I really am passionate about. I'm also a consultant like JC, and I design CEA farms and urban farms all around the world. But today I'm just a humble webinar host. So I'm really excited to get into this topic, and let's dive in. First, I wanted to share just some news clippings about this issue. And I actually didn't know much about this problem until Tania brought it up to me. But essentially, Sriracha, if you're a fan, which is this really exciting specialty hot sauce, to me, it's not that spicy. It's sort of like a sweet spicy, but it requires these chili peppers. And actually, the farms that were supplying it suddenly had a shortage. And this was a major issue. And suddenly, Sriracha wasn't available to all those that love it. Tania, what happened here?
Yeah, I really appreciate that context. So in 2023, and we continue to see this exacerbated even today, and they expect it to increase. So there's a severe drought in Mexico, California, and New Mexico, and that caused for the production output not to be at where it normally is. And then also the fact that there were supply chain shortages. So the newsworthy clips that you were showing was experienced directly by a very popular Sriracha hot chili sauce brand called Hoi Fong Foods. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. But essentially it triggered a very, discreet and anonymous request of a chili pepper farmer that owned 500 acres to grow to meet this demand because of the suppliers that weren't able to fulfill this specific ingredient to Hoi Fong Foods. And so it also had a ripple effect across supermarkets, Amazon, eBay. That caused for inflated prices to go anywhere from $30 upwards to $120. Now, how does the chili pepper shortage look for 2024 and beyond? Because of the severe weather patterns that we continue to experience, we, especially here in the US, are anticipating even more unpredictable supplies. And again, droughts, floods, hurricanes, storms, anything that is really impacting areas that are very supportive of this type of production. So very hot, warm climates, as shown in Mexico, New Mexico, and California, According to Mortar Intelligence, the U.S. market demand in 2024 is estimated to be 1.6 billion and increase to 2.16 billion in 2029. So it has a compounded annual growth rate of 6.11%. And that's really driven by trendy food trends that we're seeing in the consumer product goods category, but also ethnic cuisines. The current production is largely within the Asia Pacific region. So that market really dominates the demand for that product. And India being the world's largest producer and exporter of dry chilies. So India's top importers are China, the US, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. But we have to keep in mind that a lot of India's food production is heavily subsidized by the government. So, that drastically has an impact on input costs, farm production costs, that other markets don't typically have that privilege of experiencing. Now, chili peppers, as I mentioned earlier, and some of our experienced growers on the call can speak to the ideal CEA or environmental conditions to help it thrive. But just to set a baseline, chili peppers thrive in warm to hot temperatures, requiring temperatures between 70 degrees Fahrenheit upwards to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The last nugget of insight that we'll share today before transitioning is that in November 2022, the Indonesian government increased domestic production of chilies rather than importing them from abroad. And that had implemented or was strongly supported by strategic policies, further increasing their chili development as it relates to hybrid seeds, complete and balanced fertilization, better irrigation infrastructure, and more farmer resources. So as I mentioned earlier, how there's more government support, whether it's in Indonesia or throughout India specifically, we're starting to see kind of a deglobalization of food production. And this isn't anything new to many of us on this call, but in addition to that, having more resources invested in the domestic markets so that they can increase the supply security of these specific commodities. And I'll wrap with that.
Yeah, that was a fantastic overview of the issue, supply chains, the growth requirements for peppers. And again, that really important point that the governments are now localizing this because they can't depend on that supply chain. And I think it's so interesting because it's a product that you can really create specialty flavors out of that translates to added value products. But the main takeaway for me here is that there are microclimates, there are conditions that outdoor agriculture depends upon, whether it's enough water, enough sunlight, et cetera. And those change, right? Those microclimates are changing over time. And that makes it difficult to produce food at the cheap, abundant way we have before, which is why we need new solutions. And I was doing some research as well to complement what you were looking at here, Tania. And, there was a vanilla crop failure in Madagascar as a result of climate change and temperature changes that affected food prices globally. There was leaf rust, obviously in Central America, where a lot of coffee production happened, also affected supply and prices. We've also seen that there was garden plants that have been affected in certain ways that couldn't be grown anymore. And those prices changed the market, not just food products. So this is the new normal and something I look at a lot in my course that I'm teaching at Columbia. And that's why we want to get deeper into this. But is there a solution to this? Is CEA, Controlled Environment Agriculture, greenhouses, vertical farming, potentially a solution to this? That's what we're going to get into next. But first, JC, can you tell us what you think about that question? Can CEA be a solution to this? But before that, maybe explain the basics of how controlled environment agriculture responds to challenges like climate and drought.
Yeah, absolutely. So in horticulture, we always say that it's extremely site specific. It matters what you're doing and where you're doing it. So it's good to grow the right crops in the right place. Even in the right place, though, things can go wrong. And they have to do with climate change, soil, ecosystem collapse, and things like this. So for every single one of those, if you pick them apart, there are existing CEA solutions at various tiers of price and complexity and technology that can deal with these. So for example, when it comes to soil fertility being low and us dumping a lot of resources into it to replenish that, washing away, causing eutrophication, soilless substrates can help you kind of contain the fertilizer that you're using and use it a lot more efficiently. When it comes to these freak droughts and floods and things like that as well, soilless irrigation systems can help you manage water and conserve a lot of that. When it comes to environmental factors like too much sun, shading systems, Too much wind, screen barriers. Rain on the leaves, that's not where you want it. You want it on the roots. So the greenhouses can control a lot of these conditions to get the maximized potential out of the plant. And if you ask Kerry here momentarily, he'll tell you what a pepper plant can really do. You see that indoors. So sometimes these solutions are cheaper and less complex than people think.
You know, as I was preparing for this webinar, I was looking for a chili pepper grower, and I wrote to some big growers, but then I stumbled upon Hydro Peppers and your website, Kerry. So I want to I want the audience to hear your origin story, because I think it's kind of interesting. You do a lot of different things, but how did you end up growing peppers essentially in your house?
Okay, so I've always been like a pepperhead. I've done spicy food challenges along the way, and so I really like spicy food. And one year for Christmas, my mother-in-law got me just an aero garden. I like to cook a lot, so to grow my own herbs, right? So I started doing that, and it went so successfully that I said, what else can I grow in here? And I started looking into growing peppers, and it was a little bit too much for the aero garden to handle. So I ended up saying, okay, well, how can I grow the peppers indoors here? Because I have no outdoor space. So I stumbled upon something called a DWC growing style, deep water culture, which is hydroponic 5-gallon buckets. They all have an air tube going into them with an air stone, like similar to that you would find in a fish tank, just oxygenating the roots, always keeping the roots fresh with oxygenated water. And then, yeah, like JC was saying, you can just completely control all the nutrients that way, make sure that the roots just get their ideal supplements. And since I've been doing this, I've had pretty fantastic yields for such a small area. I mean, the picture behind me is one of the harvests I had in the past year, and I've had about 3 or 4 different harvests like this, and I only have about 27 plants in my entire house, and it's producing a decent amount, enough that I have 5 different hot sauce batches right now that I'm fermenting. I'm making pepper powders. I'm making spice rubs. Yeah, so that's kind of how I started. I'm just like I said, I'm into cooking, and the cooking aspect has brought me to here.
So can you tell us more, like how many varieties of peppers are you growing right now? Maybe you mentioned it, but I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I have about 15 different kinds, so I'm still trying to find my way. Maybe at some point I'm just going to grow 25 plants of one kind.
Right.
Now I'm kind of testing the waters and seeing what are the better producers. Certain pepper varieties produce way better than other ones. They have different temperature requirements and things like that. So I'm still in the experimental phase. There's a couple of different varieties that I want to still try. There's a couple I've tried that didn't really yield too much, so I've kind of moved them out and started new batches.
That's what I love about CEA, especially completely indoor farming like you're doing with no natural light at all. Because, isn't this right, JC? You can essentially do these trials faster, right? Because you're controlling so many variables, like making the same research that Kerry's doing indoors is easier. Can you talk a little bit more about like some of the equipment, some of the techniques of what are we trying to control when we're growing chili peppers, and beyond just like solving the problem of just having year-round chili pepper production and solving the specific issue of the shortage, what are some other benefits to CEA for chilies? I mean, can we grow them better? Can we grow higher quality? What do you think, JC?
Yeah, you can do everything faster and with less space, fewer plants, as you mentioned. It would take 100 plants outdoors to produce what he's doing in there. And so in an experiment like Kerry's, you're seeing the power of completely controlling the root zone with hydroponics, the environment with his HVAC system, and then providing LED light. And this gives us a lot of clues. You see the plants that are absolutely in no way, shape, or form stressed. So they're putting all their energy not into defending themselves or conserving energy, but actually just producing what they need to produce. And I have a quick little anecdote from one time that I was consulting in the Caribbean. We were driving by a large Scotch bonnet field, very similar situation to these red jalapenos. And there was a large field full of plants, full of peppers, and they looked okay. And then in the middle of the field, there was a lone little tree providing a little bit of shade. The pepper plants around that were greener, larger, and had way more peppers on them. That tells us that if we're managing the environment, we can put a shade cloth over these, reduce the amount of light. People think you got to maximize everything, but actually controlling it in that way will help them conserve water, be less stressed, produce everything that they need. And you don't need hydroponics necessarily to do that as well. That's a very high level of control, but even just soilless substrates, eliminating all risk of nematodes and soil pathogens and things like that, less for the plant to do in terms of defense, more growth, more happiness. Also, we're seeing ecosystem collapse in a lot of places, right? So that means that the beneficials that would be helping us deal with pests and things like that are not present. So if you have even just a simple, cheap greenhouse, you can contain those solutions that you're buying. Those are some examples of what you can do.
Yeah, it's a really helpful anecdote. And again, you made that point about controlling the variables, right? Like even just some shade can control the variables. And I think you also emphasize that there's levels of technology. You can do a shade or you can do a fully high-tech indoor system. And that's why you've been emphasizing context. And that's like exactly what we should be doing as consultants, is making the right choices with that. But that's why it's called controlled environment agriculture, because you can control different variables that optimize that growth. I'm reminded by one of the early CEA companies or vertical farming companies called Plant Lab. And what they had is they had this amazing deck, and it was this picture of like a beach, with a plant on it. And it was like, we think this is plant paradise, right? Like we think plants outdoors are the happiest they will ever be. But as JC mentioned, there's various challenges they face: changing temperatures, wind, storms, soil degradation, too much heat on their leaves, too much rain on their leaves, all these things. And I think our perception of plants being the happiest outdoors versus indoors, where like humans, we like to have the right temperature around us. We like to stay warm. We like to have that climate condition maintained, and we actually are more productive. It's the same thing for plants. So we're trying to create these ideal conditions for them to be the happiest they can be. And obviously through that, you can control flavor. You can control whatever's going to be in that plant and get a bigger punch, a more spicy hot sauce. And I just want to go back to you, Carrie. Then I'm going to go to you, Tania. Carrie, are you making hot sauce with these chilies? And like, is it something you're going to make a business out of? I see a branding logo there. So, and what's your plan with that?
Yes, so I am going to be making hot sauces. Right now, my home kitchen is like my test kitchen. So I know it could be very pungent in the air. I have my family living here, so I can't go too crazy in my own kitchen. So once I have something with a nice flavor profile, I will be renting out commercial kitchen space. And yeah, my plan is to go into business and scale it up once I have the right, the recipes down pat. I'm going to be doing jerkies, as well as hot sauce and spice rubs. That's kind of the plan for now. But yeah, eventually.
We're definitely need to do a reunion to taste test all of those, Carrie. Although I can't handle anything more than like medium spicy. I can't really get more than that. I don't know if any of you can. But
I do plan on having it levels for every stage, right? So I'll have something sweeter for people that just want something sweet and not too crazy. And I'll also have something over 1 million Scoville units for people that want to blow their face off. So
well, I appreciate all the engaging comments in the chat, and looks like we've gotten some questions here. Tania, should we try and look at some of these questions? Is there one that stands out to you in particular you want to go for?
You know what? Keep it fair. We'll just go first in, first out. So we'll start with Hannah's.
Okay. Let's start with Hannah and see if we can answer this one, panelists. From the breeding side of things, what major improvements do you think could be made in peppers, either from the growing production side or in terms of flavor and heat? So we talked about the technology, right? Creating the right space, the right environment for them. But this, Hannah makes a good point. You can actually breed certain products to create flavor and heat. I'm not a specialist on the breeding. JC, do you have any comments on that?
Absolutely. Breeding is critical to this whole endeavor, because a plant can only do what its genetics dictate in a sense. So having the right varieties for your location is very, very important. There's two sides of it. There's what the grower needs. They need something that performs with their cultivation system, with their conditions, that has a little bit of resilience. And then, of course, there's the consumer. They want things that look beautiful, that taste fantastic. And so I actually have a lot of fun breeding peppers. I've done this for years. And yes, Hannah, I think there's a lot of opportunities there for a lot of breeding to happen. That's high value.
Thanks for that, JC. That's really interesting. I think it's so, again, a lot of the crops that we grow indoors are not necessarily bred for indoor production. So it is sort of a next stage of real improvement for the sector. I think once the market, especially for vertical farming, gets bigger, you will start to see more breeders and more seeds related for that in particular. And then obviously there's some controversy and debate about GMO or CRISPR as a solution to optimize our plants, right? For both outdoors, indoors. So that is definitely an area to watch as far as big improvements, because the equipment's expensive, et cetera. But if you could solve it from the seed level, very, very interesting potential. Bob has a question. I'm going to go to you, Carrie, on this one, because it's around how many pounds per plant do you get and how many days to your harvest? I know you're a relatively new grower, but can you share that information?
Yeah, so water is 7 pounds a gallon, so 5-gallon buckets. Just the bucket is 35 pounds. The plant itself is not quite 35 pounds. It's probably going to be about 20 pounds. So each bucket is about 50-ish pounds, I would say, when they're full size. They can, in the 5-gallon buckets, I have plants here 5 feet tall. They can get much bigger if you have a bigger, bucket or space for the roots to grow.
5 feet tall, like your family walking into your grow room must be just hilarious. They're like, oh, he's good. He's got
yeah, and it looks like you're on another planet in here because of the purple lighting, Okay, so part B to that question. Sorry, I lost track.
Sorry, how many days till harvest?
How many days till harvest? So for peppers that aren't as spicy, you're looking at roughly 3 months from the time you sow your seeds to the time you get that first pepper. That you might need a couple more weeks after that first pepper until you get that harvest. For super hots, you could be looking at 150 days. That's about 5 months, maybe even 6 months. But what I've seen is that some varieties they're really not producing so well until about 7-8 months, the really hot ones. Primatalis, which are one of the hottest on earth, it took about 180 days and the plant didn't produce all that many peppers also.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And this kind of goes into a little bit of Dr. Kelly Gelhoff. Hi, Kelly. How's it going? It's nice to connect with you again. Her question, which is about, that there's data that we're sharing here about experimenting and specific crops and grow systems variables, but what would it really take to share this across the CEA industry? This is an interesting question. So many people are trying things in silos. I've been in the sector for over 10 years, and this is a consistent problem of people repeating the same mistakes and not sharing. So I'm curious, actually, Carrie, I imagine you find some things online or on Reddit. That's where a lot of small hobby growers find information. Tania, what are your thoughts on this question of creating collaboration and data sharing in the industry?
Yeah, I think the intention is there. I think sometimes it's like, it depends on, okay, are you doing this at a home grower level, or are you trying to do this for a for-profit business that is sustainable, right?
Exactly.
And I can speak to the for-profit business that is sustainable because sometimes it's hard. It's just like you want to get to the market, but you need to kind of just keep things to yourself, at least to get the product successful in the market. Now, what we always kind of lean on is, once we fully understood everything about our product and de-risked it for our growers, whether home, hobbyist, or commercial, then we can be more forthright and transparent with everything that we've learned. But over time, I think I kind of spoke too soon in the past, where it's just like, I want to be transparent with everything from day one. And sometimes that can hurt you because it's like you haven't fully vetted out every what-if scenario as possible. So from my perspective, from a for-profit business, an impact-driven business, we try to just know every detail so that you can not have repeated mistakes for others before providing information that can be of value to society, because that's really what I think all of us are on this call for.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly, Tania. And I think, at the commercial scale, like, it's hard because of, investment, trade secrets, but also, yeah, you want to put the right information out there. And there's so many farms that are different. I think that's why consultants exist and why JC emphasized the context that matters, because, nobody wants to give you bad information. And if it's just published online or shared and you take it and you build a commercial farm out of it, something goes wrong, that's also not that helpful either. So we need something in the middle. Now, Resource Innovation Institute is creating some standards around water use and energy use. This is an example of a not-for-profit that's been given money to standardize the sector. There's a couple others like that. So I think we're going to see more of that as the industry grows. And I think that's the best mechanism to do that. At Agritecture, we've tried a sort of for-profit mechanism to do this with a software called Agritecture Designer that lets you estimate the CapEx, OpEx yield of any greenhouse or vertical farm. We don't have chili peppers on there, but we have 100 crops, and we do have regular peppers on there, for example. And again, we struggle because we want to make sure the data is as accurate as possible before we publish it. And again, we make money off subscriptions to justify that data and that creation of that product that we have. So it is useful, but again, there's a lot of difficulty in planning these commercial farms. And in the end, you probably are going to need experts if it's big. But at the hobby level, there's so much free information out there. I'm always inspired by the collaboration across cannabis or food production or hobby growing. It's really, really exciting. Same thing with orchids. Like there's a big community for growing orchids, et cetera. So one last question really quickly. This is from Tir Rakiat, and this question's more about, can CEA maintain the taste of the products, right? Because sometimes an added value product like Sriracha changes a supplier, or again, weather changes, they get the product, but the taste is different. I've seen this with a lot of other crops. Just emphasize again, JC, how CEA delivers consistency. We've talked about it a bit, but one more time.
Consistency is a very high priority in CEA. Everything you're paying for in terms of controls is to avoid the unwanted fluctuations in the environment and seasons and things like this that would change your product. Your customers expect something very, very consistent, and everything you do in terms of irrigation and climate control and so on and so forth is all about kind of normalizing those parameters.
Amazing.
And real quick, Henry, as well, when it comes to information on these plants, seed providers are a very good source because they want you to succeed, and they tell you how long it takes to grow and how much to expect. Now, more and more, they're actually getting you information for CEA here. That's new, though.
That's true. That's a good point, too, that the suppliers themselves can be really valuable sources for the information. So we're trying to keep these webinars tight because we want them to be something you can enjoy in the middle of the day and get back to your work, something that inspires you and educates you. So we're going to wrap up here. You all have been great with your questions, but I want to give our panelists one more time to give a shout out about something they want to share. Maybe it's a piece of information, or maybe it's something about their business. But let's hear from you, Carrie. What's your shout out to the attendees?
I would say to check out Hydro Peppers on Facebook, and hydropeppers.com is my website. Right now, I'm currently just selling seeds and a couple little things like t-shirts and coffee mugs and stuff like that. But I'm gonna have like we talked about, hot sauce and spice rubs on there soon, as well as all different flavors of jerkies. So yeah, I appreciate everyone just checking that out. And if it doesn't look that big right now, we're ramping up. We're trying to make this a thing.
Awesome. We're going to watch that, Carrie. So nice to connect with you, and thanks for participation. JC, what about you?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. If you want to check out cultibioltd.com, learn a little bit more about how my team is building farms around the world that are really meant to be lean, tailored, efficient, sustainable, to just make things easier for people and build prosperity.
We love that. And what about you, Tania? Maybe something about, are there going to be more webinars on this sort of topic, this thematic focus? Maybe that's a good thing, or something else.
Great plug. First of all, thank you all so much for making this happen. It really is your efforts and time that we appreciate. Yes, we want this to be an ongoing series. So we work with whoever wants to collaborate with this to make this known to the industry, covering more commodities, because climate change, as better than all of us, and perhaps me and Henry, is driving, shifting production in areas. But also, if you happen to be at Indoor AgCon this upcoming Monday and Tuesday in Las Vegas here in the States, we will be there. So at booth 1318, feel free to come by.
Cool. And I'm Henry at Agritecture. You can learn more about Agritecture by searching us. But lately, I've been doing a lot of farm tours and content for my new course at Columbia on Instagram. So you can follow me Instagram at the Agritect. So I'd love to see you there. So as we wrap up, again, I really want to thank all of our panelists and our attendees. This webinar was made possible by Re-Nuble. Re-Nuble is going to be making more webinars like this across all different crops that are threatened from climate change, supply chain issues, you name it, and how controlled environment agriculture could be a solution. And as you can see, we're going to have expert guests as part of that. What I love about Re-Nuble is that they're focusing on closing the loop in agriculture. So much of agriculture is linear. You put an input in and waste is created. But what about a circular system where we can actually use waste to create the resources we need for agriculture. That is the future we need. That is deep green sustainability. And Re-Nuble has been on a mission to do that for a long time. And it's been a privilege for me to know Tania and to see her go through this journey of building this business, building the research, all of this. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to check out Re-Nuble's website and reach out to Tania. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Keep it spicy and have a good day.